Hey yo, what is going on guys? CashinClean here. So for today's video, I want to talk about the marketplace and give you guys some tips and tricks regarding that. Now this isn't like a direct Flux making strategy or just how to make Flux. It can be a little bit, but I will make an updated Flux guide for you guys in the future. But if you guys are curious and you want some strategies, you can refer to my previous videos because I do have some Flux making strategies on there. Just know that some methods might be a little bit outdated depending on if you're on console or PC. And I made those Flux guides before the console incident, so that's just something to note there. And if you don't know what the console incident is, it was just pretty much a big dupe that happened and the marketplace became Omega scuffed. So anyway, going to the marketplace, if you don't have access to the marketplace, you're probably a very brand new player. You have to hit mastery 20 for Trove. So Trove mastery 20. Best way to do that is just level up your trial characters to 4, and then the characters that you do have unlocked, just level them up a little bit, and you can just do your quest line along with it. Once you have access, you have a couple options here. This I usually almost always leave on any, unless I'm looking for a very specific item, but even then I still leave it on any. Hide collected if I'm trying to look for specific mastery items, so you don't have to use this. I usually have this one always checked, sort by unit price, so that way if I'm searching for a specific resource, it'll give me the lowest price of the item. So if I wanted to buy Shapestone, for example, you can see that the cheapest is for 7 each. And if I uncheck this and look for Shapestone, it's going to give me different options here. But usually this method can be okay if you don't want to get like a full stack of the item. But even then, I don't know, me personally, when I was playing Trove when I was still super new, even though it said a stack, I still bought it no matter what the item was because I knew that I was going to use it later on anyway. So it just saved me some time and some flux later on. But I get that some people just might not have the flux. Like right now, if I have 61k flux, the only things I can afford are these. And if I absolutely need it, then that would be my option right there. Now, if you're more of like a mid-game to end-game player, you're eventually going to get to the point where you just need mastery, or you want to get mastery to eventually get rank 1 mastery, just to get everything in the game, just being a collector in some sort. So eventually, you'll get to the point where you have to hide collected, and if you're trying to search for specific items, I have found that just going through the alphabet like this will help you find certain items. Now, obviously, this account is straight up missing everything, but sometimes if you just do hide collected and search, sometimes the item for whatever reason just doesn't come up. So that way, if you go through the alphabet, you'll get different items, different results. Like I said, I'm missing pretty much everything, so it's not going to be the best example, but you'll just go through the alphabet, just click every letter on your keyboard, and you can try to find items that way. I have heard some people use a space, so you can use a space to see if that helps, or what you could do is just do a colon, and then click search. And then if you want to be very specific, you can use these to adjust what you need. And then whenever you're done, make sure you uncheck hide collected, because if you're trying to find a specific resource like, I don't know, Cinnabar, then the item is just not going to show up in here. Or if you have an item and you're trying to find that specific item, like it won't show up because you have hide collected on. So make sure you're only doing this if you're missing a specific mastery item. Now this next tip also applies to mid to end game players, but if you are a new player, just I guess something to note for later on. But when you're trying to sell stuff on the marketplace, you'll notice that you have one slot, and I don't know, if you are a mid to end game player, maybe you have more of these spots unlocked. The best method that I have found if you're trying to sell stuff more efficiently is sell specific resources on one account and then use a alt account to sell mastery items, so mounts, allies, things like that, because those take longer to sell. It depends on what the item is, but for the most part, certain items will take a little bit longer to sell compared to other items. So for example, if you're trying to sell Cinnabar, that will most likely sell faster, assuming you're selling it at the appropriate price of what it's listed at, compared to a mount from Sunfest, for example. It can be any event, but just some random mount. Because what happens is people will need the Cinnabar to craft certain things, because it's something that you're going to use more often, whereas the mastery item, it could just be somebody wanting to collect mastery that one day, and they happen to stumble upon your item. And sometimes your item just won't sell too often. I remember I had the golden egg for the Dusk Dragon. So this dragon egg, it had the full dragon of it, the golden version of it. I tried selling it on the market, it just took way too long. Like I had it sitting there for weeks. From what I remember, I believe that one in particular sold for 40 to 50 mil flux, if I'm not mistaken, at least at that time. So I listed it for around that price. And that's the other thing, if you want stuff to sell faster, you'd have to sell it lower, but just know that you'd be losing out on some potential flux that way. But yeah, it took me about 2-3 weeks to even sell that dragon. So not like a super long amount of time, but it is worth it in the long run, because then you can use that flux for power rank, getting more mastery, just kind of depends. And that's the other thing I wanted to bring up. If you happen to get a new mastery item on day 1 or even day 2, you can try selling that instantly because it'll sell for a pretty high amount, depending on the item. Sometimes it's like a common ally that people will have, and it'll just be super farmable. People can access it very easily. So maybe it'll be listed for like 5k flux, but sometimes there's going to be like rare items, some rare mounts, some rare wings, and those could sell from 20 mil to 30 mil, maybe even upwards of 100 mil. It kind of just depends. When the Primal Paragon update first came out, the Primal Paragon wings related to it, on PC at least, it sold for around 120 mil, somewhere around there. But eventually it got duped and now it's omega cheap. Let's see how cheap it is right now. So it is currently 6 mil Flux, and I understand that you can't list an item for 120 mil, so that's why people use Discord trade chats. They say that they have this specific item, and then people will offer them, or you can list an offer of how much you want to sell it for. But if you do that, just try to make sure you're getting a good deal out of it. Not like a super good deal where you're basically scamming the other guy. But let's just say, for example, this is a very extreme situation, but let's just say you have a stack of Shapestone and you're asking to sell it in Discord trade chat for 200 mil. No one's gonna buy that, first of all. Or if you say DM me offers or something like that, some people do that, or they DM them offers. I mean, for Shapestone, they're probably not gonna do that, but let's just say hypothetically they do. They would pretty much give you offers based off of the marketplace, maybe a little bit lower, because if you're trying to sell it, maybe you're offering it for a little bit lower just to kind of get rid of it. Basically, just don't sell it for like 200 mil if you have a stack of Shapestone. If you have a stack, just look at the price, just kind of go approximately around there. Or if you're trying to sell it immediately, maybe you can go a little bit less. So if you do want stuff to sell immediately, you can try selling it for a little bit less. If you don't mind waiting, then you can try selling it at the suggested price, which is what most people sell it for. Now, let's say hypothetically you're not sure how much the item would go for. Well, you can refer to the data gathered over here, which I will leave a link for in the description down below if you want to refer to it. Pretty much it has every item, I think. Because right now I'm in other, I would just have to go to other items. Like, I don't know if I go geode. Is it gonna load? I'm not sure. Okay, yeah, there we go. So these are the specific items. You can see how much it's sold for on specific days for every item. Now, I believe this is only on PC, because I guess it's easier to gather the data on PC compared to console. So if you're on console, I'm sorry, I wish this was available for you guys as well. But you can kind of just refer to this. If you're unsure about how much an item would sell for, just find it on here, because you can find golden dragon eggs as well. So if you look at the golden Imperium dragon egg, it says 0 here because the marketplace was unavailable for PC, but it looks like it sold for 50 mil. I don't know if it's actually worth 50 mil, but it seems like the Resistor Dragon also sold for 50 mil. But Starfire's, wait, 45 mil. Wait, what the heck? Okay, whoever got this Starfire egg, oh wait, this is June 2nd. Wait, June 2nd. Pretty sure Starfire is worth way more than that. A while back, Atro gave me a tip on the pricing for these things. I don't know why I said these things, but for Starfire Dragon, for example. But basically, on PC, I don't know what it would be like on console, you would take the price of credit pouches and you would add up the value based off of the Dragon weekly deal. So let's just say, for example, credit pouches were 4.5 million Flux. You would use that value, 4.5 million, until you got to, what is it, 7,500 for the Dragon weekly deal, because that has the effigy. So technically, if the Starfire Dragon was your last dragon, then you can use that Flux to get the credit pouches, to get the effigy, to get the Starfire Dragon. So if you're trying to sell it, you can base it off of the value for what I just said right there. Hopefully that made sense. Now, going into the next tip, this method could take a little bit longer of a time, but it could be worth your time if you're patient enough. So you guys can get a little bit more creative than this, but I'm just giving an example. So Cinnabar, for example, people are selling them stacks upon stacks, apart from this guy, 2,500. So he's probably trying to sell it a little bit quicker. But basically, you can see this entire first page is covered by people selling it for a stack. It goes from 8 to 10 over here. And sometimes people just don't want to buy a stack of these. Maybe they just need, I don't know, 1,000. Maybe they need 2,500 to craft a certain item, and they just don't want to get a stack of it. Well, you can kind of go back a little bit depending on the item that you're searching, and it looks like over here people are starting to sell them for a little bit more each, but for less, if that makes sense. So Cinnabar, for example, you could sell yours 1,000 at a time for 15 each, kind of like what these people are doing. Now, this is obviously a horrible example because 15k Flux is not going to get you anywhere, but it's a start. So you can use this information on any item you want. Here we have Gleamstone. So it looks like this person over here is selling it for 30 each instead of the 26, and you can see that everything is listed for a stack. If you go back a little bit, and it seems like this one's kind of interesting. So yeah, right over here, this guy's selling 2,000 for 52 each, and 52 all the way from 26 is a pretty big jump. So you could sell yours for around that price, or you could try to sell it for a little bit lower. But the thing about selling it like this, you're gonna get less Flux, so like 100k Flux compared to the 200k Flux. But in the long run, you're gonna be making more Flux, if that makes sense. That's assuming you're selling all of yours for the price listed over here. And I would say be careful about listing stuff like this, because events come around, new items come around, these prices might go up or down. So if you're just constantly relisting your items, double check your items every now and then, because the price of it may have gone up or it may have gone down. So if it's not selling, maybe the price of it has gone down and you're just overselling it at that point. But if the overall price of it has gone up, maybe you should consider raising the price a little bit, because there's more demand for it. And that's the other thing about this. I mentioned it in my Flux guide, but in the Chaos Chest bench, I guess I can't really access the one in here. So this thing over here, I mentioned this in my Flux guide, but pretty much Chaos Crafting bench, there's a new item every other week for the most part. There have been times where they just skip the every other week thing, but usually every other week there's a new item. So if we look at the new item, usually it's going to be a mount or an ally. Sometimes it's kind of rare, but they'll add a ship or something else. Basic canned fish. If we wanted to buy basic canned fish, you can see that people are selling it for a stack. You can sell it for 200 and even up the price a little bit. So I don't know, you can do probably like 60. I mean, it kind of depends. I'm not too familiar with the basic canned fish market, but this is kind of a weird item to try it on, but pretty much people would want that much for the Chaos Chest item, so you can list it for that much. So find what the price is, list 200 at a time, and then you can raise the unit price. So unit price is just going to be this one over here. So you would type in, I don't know, for that one you can do like 60, 70. I just don't know how often that one specifically sells for, but let's just pretend it was an ally. Let's just go to this one, for example. So Heart of Darknesses. You can sell Heart of Darknesses. You can do the 25. It's going to be kind of less flux because it's 25, but it's not that bad. But that is if you had them. And one thing to note is that each item is going to be pretty different regarding this. So let's just hypothetically say Cinnabar. I don't know why I keep going to Cinnabar, or maybe we can just take Bleachbone. Seems like some people are already doing it. You can see that there's lots of stacks of these items. So hypothetically, if the cheapest amount was a stack, for example, so you just had the first page being a stack, you could buy that stack and then start selling them off for whatever the Chaos Chest item. It doesn't even have to be a Chaos Chest item. Let's just say an event item needed that specific item, and let's just say it needed 100, for example. You can sell them 100 at a time for a higher price, so that way you're making more flux in profit, because chances are people are going to need that item to craft for mastery. So whether it's a Chaos Chest item or an event item, so for event items, for example, usually gardening items like these will be pretty high in price because it might have you craft something that needs that item. But if we just take a look at the bench here, there's a lot of items to kind of go through. So there's mushroom chunks, you can do it with that. Enchanted wood, I know that this is a pretty good flux making shred as well if you're trying to sell these. There's also fairy dust, and would you look at that, there's cinnabar. So these items here, if you see in the marketplace that there is a stack, I'm just going to use this as an example, you can see that there's a list of stacks of them. You can buy the first stack and then sell them at lower amounts. So whatever the amount is needed. So I don't know, this one needed 300 cinnabar. So you can list 300 at a time, figure out what the unit price is. Shapestone is 7. You would see when people started listing them for like 1,000 over here. So I don't know, Shapestone's just a horrible example, but let us say over here, for example, this is a pretty big jump. I'd say for Shapestone, I guess you can stick to around these prices here, but I hope that you guys get the point. If people are selling these a stack at a time and there's a lot of it, chances are you can buy that item, start selling 1,000 at a time, for example, and then raise the unit price up a little bit. That way you're making profit again, and even with the tax, you'll be making profit. As long as you're selling it for a little bit higher, because if I bought this stack and just sold it 7 each, then I'm losing profit. All right, I talked about a lot of tips regarding the marketplace. If you guys have a method that I didn't mention that you guys want to share with other people, feel free to drop it down in the comments down below to help one another out. One final tip that I would give is if you have specific event resources, like pumpkins, for example, or just if you happen to farm a lot of a specific resource, or if you find that one day they're cheaper than usual, you can buy those items, and then later on during an event, that item might go up in price because there's going to be a higher demand for that item. So then you can just start selling it in bulk, and you're going to have a lot of people going to you to get that item. So hopefully that made sense, and hopefully that helps you guys get some flux in the future. But if you guys have enjoyed the video, please drop a like, as it does help out the channel a lot. And as always, thank you all so much for listening, watching, viewing, and subscribing, and I'll talk to you guys later. One super big thing to note is that if you happen to leave the marketplace open for a long time, you will get trade banned. This is to prevent people from botting the marketplace, where basically they would use a script to search for specific items, and if it's listed at a low amount, it buys it for you, and it pretty much does that the entire day for you, so it's like all automated and stuff. So that's what it's trying to prevent. So if you happen to leave the marketplace open for a while, I guess they can't really check what you're doing to the marketplace. So if you happen to AFK like this, like you just had it open, and then you went to go make a bowl of cereal, you helped your mom with the groceries, you went for a walk, went to the gym or something, came back, you will notice that you will be trade banned. And if you try to appeal it, there has been many times in the past, or even modders, for example, people modding on PC, trying to design a nice marketplace UI, they have gotten trade banned, and when they tried to appeal, it got denied. So they take this stuff very seriously. If you leave it open, I don't know what the exact estimate would be. Also, how the heck did I get a confetti ball from a piñata? That's kind of weird. But anyway, I don't know what the time limit is on how long you can keep this open for. I left it open for a couple minutes before nothing happened. I'm not sure if it's 5 minutes or 10 minutes or when the AFK timer is up. I could do an experiment with that if you guys want me to, because I think this is some automated thing where if you leave it open for a specific amount of time, it just automatically does the trade ban for you. So I guess if that's something you guys are interested in, I can try. So that way we have like a approximation on how long we can leave it open for. So if you plan on being AFK for a bit, just try not to leave the marketplace open because they will trade ban you for that. And once you're trade banned, there's a good chance that they're not going to revert the changes there. So they're just going to deny you. And you can maybe try to imagine what Trove would be like without being able to trade. It's going to be pretty tough because you'd have to farm every bit of item. So you would no longer be able to buy bombs. You would have to craft them. So you'd have to go farm the materials for that just so you can start farming again. Flux could be a potential issue, but I have talked about how to make Flux without the marketplace. So I guess you can refer to that video. But things like depth score, for example, imagine farming all that depth score you need to finish your mystic gear. I don't know, there's just a lot of stuff. It'll just become really annoying. So my advice there is be careful, try not to leave it open. If you guys are curious, I can just make a separate video on just trade banning myself, just so we have an approximation on how long it would be. But I feel like even if I made that video, they might adjust that time to be shorter, because then whoever has a bot like that would be like, oh, so it's 15 minutes. So then they would use the bot for 10 minutes at a time, close the marketplace, reopen. I don't know, they can make some complicated thing to bypass it or something. Either way, that is the story there. And at the same time, I don't know if opening and closing resets the timer for that. I really don't know how all that works. I'm just here to tell you guys that it's possible to get trade banned, so be careful.